listen to whatever they have to say, and we have to answer their questions. Is it because they're speaking the truth? Is it because atheism actually carries intellectual currency? No, it's simply because the white man has been able to take over the Americas and had the Industrial Revolution. It's another big thing, by the way, from the 60s in Britain onwards. They've been able to seize these opportunities where other nations have not been able to do it. Yeah, and therefore they've concentrated their economic and military power, which is expanded into, also media power in the New Age. So we've had to listen. We've had to listen. It's really interesting because, you know, I'm not going to lie to you, there's some really interesting things, yeah? For example, the idea of homosexuality. Before we talk about one God and something, we'll talk about homosexuality. We're going straight into the deep end, right? Okay, so with homosexuality, it's really interesting how I was hearing a discussion one time. It's an anecdotal experience. And it was a white person complaining about the attitudes of a black Christian. They were complaining about the attitudes of a black Christian. And the black Christian was not necessarily in line, they didn't believe in same-sex marriage, for instance, yeah? And the white person was saying, well, why don't they believe in this, and this is homophobia and all these things. The reason why the black person doesn't believe in same-sex marriage is simply because your great-granddad colonized, enslaved his great-granddad, taught him the religion of his day, which was Christianity. He hasn't left it, you have, okay, and therefore he has a different opinion to you on this matter. So it was quite ironic that the white man, and this is becoming, it's not to say genetics, when I say the white man, beware that I'm talking about the archetypal post-colonial white man. I'm not talking about the color of the skin. I'm talking about the idea, post-colonial white man. The white man wants us to just change in his image. That's why atheism was on the increase, and that is why we've had to answer questions about atheism. Okay? If we lived 100 years ago, I would not even begin talking about atheism, because it would be an insignificant world reality. Yeah, that is just the environmental reality. Yeah, if the Maratha Empire or the Sikh Empire of the Indians somehow became superpowers, we might be here talking about Sikhism or polytheism in the first instance. But that's not what's happened. So what is atheism? Atheism is a lack of belief in God. Yeah, or a creator, a sustainer. The atheist wants us to answer the question of how can you prove God exists, that a creator exists? And frankly, you guys know the arguments, okay? I don't want to bore you with the arguments. The arguments are the arguments. The arguments are the arguments. You have cosmological arguments and contingency arguments and fine-tuning arguments and arguments from consciousness. Yeah? You have all these arguments that have been said, iterated and reiterated, that we've said, we've argued with them. Yeah? And these arguments are not just Muslim arguments. Clearly they're not. Leibniz, Newton, very many philosophers believed in these things. And they would argue for the things that we're arguing for today. They actually, I would argue that most Enlightenment philosophers pre-New World were probably monotheists or theists, probably. Yeah, in the Renaissance period, look at Descartes. He is the archetypal rationalist. Yeah, obviously his book, The Meditations, is testimony of that. He was a firm believer in God. Okay, so the new atheist or the atheist or whatever you want to call them, I believe the following. Yeah, I believe that atheism grew out of two or three things. One is the weakness of the Christian tradition to deal with medicine and science, generally speaking, and this can be found. If you look, for example, this is a really interesting thing. If you go on Google Ngram, Google Ngram is like Google Trends, but it's a little bit different. Google Ngram is a really interesting data tool whereby you can put like names, labels, yeah? Put Christianity in Google Ngram. What it does is it tries to track how many books have been read on that particular topic. Yeah, if you look at Christianity, there's a steep decline. Yeah, it goes down. If you look at the word science, for example, there's an incremental, or you can even say an exponential increase. And that shows something. That obviously, correlation doesn't always mean causation, but we can tell through the timeline that Christianity was not able to deal with certain things, and people moved away from Christianity and kind of lost faith because of its inability to deal with scientific phenomena and medicine of these things. That was one of the reasons. Another thing is the increase in philosophy, the Enlightenment period, and rationalism. The idea of the Trinity was not appealing to the majority of people. It's surprising, that if you go to the majority of people now, although in the census it might be the case, 2011 census, that in London it's meant to be like a Christian majority by a very thin majority. But if you ask a so-called Christian, do they believe that Jesus is actually God? They would not believe that. I believe they wouldn't believe that. They wouldn't really go to church. So Christianity now is dying because, frankly, it doesn't have that right. You can't rationalize it. It's become non-rationalizable. And people have realized that, and it's gone against scientific and industrial. For them, it's perceived to have gone against scientific and industrial development. So Christianity is on a decline, and atheism has basically grew because for the layman in the West, if Christianity is not true, then there is no religion that's true. That's how they've generalized it. Why look at the religion of the heathens and the pagans and the people of the Orient? Why do that when actually we had the only religion which could possibly be true, which is Christianity, and that's clearly not true? It doesn't help us. So why look at these other religions? So for that reason, I think atheism is a natural response to it. It's not that the idea of no God, no creator, no cause, no sustainer, no maintainer actually carries any intellectual weight. Another thing is the problem of evil. Look at all these things that have happened, wars that have happened. The majority of heavy wars that have happened in the world have been in Europe. Trust me, if we're talking about things, if we're talking about wars which have led to people being killed, okay, the majority of those wars have been wars in Europe, in terms of casualties. World War II is probably the most in world's history. So for that reason, people think, why is this happening? How could God allow this? Problem of evil is the most emotional, non-intellectual argument, but very powerful because we are very emotional creatures. And so for that reason, people have separated themselves away. On a very fundamental level, I would say that why put the onus on us to answer the question, how does God exist, or why does God exist? I would say, what evidence is there to suggest that there is no causation to this universe? That's how I would put it. If you don't believe in causation, then we can go to contingency. So we can either say, this universe has no cause, which defies your understanding of causation, or say this universe is not dependent upon anything and it's independent. Either of those things don't carry any intellectual weight and cannot be substantiated with any evidence. Simple. And if you do agree that there is a cause and that the universe is dependent, which is both the causation argument, or cosmological argument, and or the contingency argument, then we just have to simply ask, what is the cause? Use your deductive reasoning to tell me what the cause is. What is the universe dependent upon? So then if we say, okay, the universe is dependent upon something which is independent, because otherwise we'd have that regressive infinite chain, then in that case we can say, okay, fine. So what is that? What do we want to call that? What is the relationship we should have with that? And for us, the Muslim will say that is the creator, the sustainer, the maintainer, and it's God. That's as simple as that. So the cause necessarily has to be something which always existed, independent, powerful, has knowledge, and has the creative capacity to put things into existence. When you realize, by the way, and I'm going to make this very, it's going to be an adventurous shot. I'm going to say to you guys that when you realize that there is a singular cause, when you realize there's one cause, one singular cause, then you can literally, it makes sense to kind of analyze what religions are there in the world. Okay, what are the accessible religions to human beings? What are the religions which are being practiced? What are the ways of life which claim to have an understanding of that singular cause, that monotheistic, you could even say, understanding? And I would say to you that the most monotheistic religion is Islam. I would say that. All the other religions are not monotheistic in that sense. I would say all the other main religions, including Judaism, including Sikhism, I could make the argument, but it's not really the time to go into details about it, are not monotheistic in the purest sense. And there is a form of what we Muslims would term as shirk involved in any of those religions. Yeah? So when we've realized now that, okay, the human being has been placed by something or someone that has placed a human being into this cosmos, and it's a significant placement and a purposeful and meaningful placement, then the question is, what is the relationship that should exist between this sentient human being and the creator or this cause or whatever you want to call it? And we would say that the relationship should not differ from the relationship that the cause has with anything else in the creation, which is a relationship of submission, in appreciation, understanding of the might of this creator respective to the insignificance of the creation. And there is no other appropriate relationship that this creation can have with the creator but that particular relationship of submission and obedience. And if you attempt anything else, it will not work. It's as simple as that. And so we would say that the monotheistic understanding of God is the most patently clear and rationalizable understanding of where we came from, how and why we are, and where we're going. And for that reason, I say that Trinitarianism doesn't make any sense. It simply doesn't. Any honest Christian who has studied, number one, the basics of logic, or even without studying it, frankly, they'll understand that it's irreconcilable with rationality, and study the historical development of the Trinity, will realize that actually this is the development of the Roman Empire. That's what Trinitarian amounts to. That's what the heart of Christianity actually is. It's simply a development from the Roman Empire. Whether we want to say they've absorbed the idea of the Greeks, the ideas, the mythological ideas, because look, you have a father, you have a son, just like you had fathers and sons with the gods and demigods and semi-gods and heroes of the Greeks. It's not very difficult to make that a connection, to be honest with you, to say actually, when in the councils, what's it called? Ecumenical councils, thank you. Sometimes I get, yes. In the ecumenical councils, the seven main ones, Nicaea 325, is it Rimini? Yeah, I don't know when that happened. But I don't think that was ecumenical. Then you had Constantinople 381 and Chalcedon 451, whatever it was. Those seven councils, and if you look at the creeds of those councils, a clear development from Unitarianism to Binitarianism to Trinitarianism. And this is, by the scholars of the Christians, kind of agreed upon, really, to be honest with you. So when you realize that historical development, then you realize actually Christianity is a historical development. The core of Christianity is a historical development. And by the way Islam was spread was different to the way Christianity was spread. Christianity the thing is, you have already a pre-established Roman Empire. And then you had emperors who then spread it into the eastern and western parts of that empire. With Islam, didn't have a pre-existing empire, which emperors decided, I'm going to change my religion. It started with men and women, right? It started with human beings. Yeah? So for that reason, there is a difference in the way that Islam was spread and Christianity was spread on a fundamental level. But the reason why we're talking about Christianity is because of that, because of the fact that, once again, the Roman Empire was the empire of the day. And it was able to spread that message to all those people. And by the way, that doesn't say it's false because of that, because that would be the genetic fallacy. And I wouldn't say that atheism is false because the white man promoted it. Because once again, that would be the genetic fallacy. I'm just making the point that actually the reasons why we're talking about these things is because of this. Yeah? Which is a different point altogether. So no one's strawman me in the grilling a Muslim session. Now here, I wanted to say to you guys also that, frankly, once you come to the realization that, okay, there's one God exists, it can't be a triune God, it can't be no God, and there is a relationship that God must have, then you ask yourself, what is the intermediary, or what is the means by which and through which this creator, this sustainer, this maintainer, or this cause is going to communicate with human beings in order to inform the human being, okay, that actually they have a purpose in life. And we say that the intermediary that was used was two kinds of intermediary. It had angels and prophets. One metaphysical and the other physical. Metaphysical entities of angels are just like metaphysical entities which we can't see, which are actually scientific. When you use metaphysical language in once again, the white man's world, post-colonial world, say, come on man, fairy tales and Halloween and this. And I know it conjures very negative connotations of superstition and all these things which we've left behind in the Dark Ages. Okay? Well, look, metaphysics is making a comeback in science. Look at quantum mechanics. Look at quantum physics. Look at philosophy. Most of the things, the precepts and concepts that you believe in, that the scientific method that is based on is actually our metaphysical concepts. Ideas of rationalism and mathematics. They're not physical. Anyways, so we have the physical the physical prophets and the metaphysical angels, and then you have that connection. And so we would say God communicated with human beings to remind the human being. Going back to Descartes, Descartes said that human being has the autograph of God in him. That's the language that he used. In other words, the human being is born predisposed to the idea of God. And the Islamic thesis is the same. The Islamic thesis is that God predetermined or pre-allowed this idea of submission to him to exist. And what messengers do is come to remind human being of that reality. That's the Islamic thesis, yeah? So messengers have come before time, all of which with the same message. And if you look at the Old Testament corpus, and you look at the New Testament corpus, like the book of Acts, for example, is really interesting. You'll find that really this is even not just a Quranic message. This is an extra Quranic message. It's a biblical message. You can even extend it to other religions. That actually prophets came aforetime. There is this meta-narrative. It does exist within the historical framework, the religious framework, that there were these messengers that came, all of which with this message, to remind human beings to worship God and to abstain from doing the bad things, or the socially bad things that have been told to us are bad from the Creator who knows all. But they also came with a miracle. Now, I don't know how long I've got left here. Not that long, yeah? Maybe 5 minutes? 5, 10 minutes? 1, 2 minutes? I'll need 5 minutes, yeah? Is that right? I'll need 5 minutes, okay? It's not like I'm making a good use of that time, but I just want to make sure that... What I was going to say to you guys was that basically, the prophets came with two things, yeah? All of the prophets came with a message and an evidence. And the evidence was, if you think about it, the message was meant to appeal to a sense of spiritual identity. Was meant to allow the human being to recollect that information which was embedded into him in the first instance in the pre-existence phase. Through their souls, because we believe as Muslims that human beings had been conditioned through their souls. But the evidence was really an evidence which would allow human beings to rationalize Islam or the message of Islam. And those evidences are many. And an evidence is meant to defy certain things. In my estimation, an evidence is something, yeah, which probabilistically would not happen otherwise. So, for example, human beings can do certain things. You can say, and some do say this, they use the word i'jaz, yeah? I'jaz in Arabic means something which is miraculous or paralyzing or incapacitating or whatever. But this is not the word the Quran uses. The word in the Quran is ayah. An ayah is a sign. Literally, it's like something which you can see, it's clear, self-evident. And we will say that the Quranic message in itself is a sign. But also, the linguistic composition of the Quran is a sign. The structural, intertextual, knitted togetherness of the Quranic message is also a sign. We would say the prophecies of the Quran and the Hadith, where literally the prophecies that are mentioned, is also another sign. Yeah? We would say the extra Quranic information, the historical information, for example, the mentioning of Prophet Muhammad in other books, is another sign. We would say the social and economic effects of Islam in its spreading is another sign. We would say the effects of Islam on human beings is another sign. So there are many signs that indicate the truth, the reality of Islam. We're not going to go over them because we don't have time. If you do want to, I've done like series on almost all of those things. So like structural coherence of the Quran, prophecies of the Quran and the Sunnah. All of that is on my channel. So you can, if you're interested in any of those to research, you can research those things on my channel, inshallah. And obviously, it will increase my views and stuff like that. And so I'm going to leave it at that. So we will say that you have two things, generally speaking. You have the message and you have what could, in a vernacular sense, be classed as the miracle. from that perspective, will say that Islam comes with both of those things. And if someone is sincere, has, I would call it a psycho-spiritual, yeah? I don't know if that's a word, but let's just coin it and throw it out there. Someone else will use it and it'll become a word, yeah? If someone has a psycho-spiritual inclination towards the truth, and they are sincere, I would argue that the Islamic thesis would be enough to convince them. Okay? Okay, now we can have a rest. Okay. Is that it? Good timing. I tried to do it in 2 minutes.
Can you 5 minutes to wait?